control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I am covering the Twilight Zone, not our usual Twilight Zone. It's the second reboot of the series. We covered the first one in a much earlier episode, which was from the 80s. This one was in 2002. An interesting time to release this sort of thing. 2002, obviously, just after 9/11. And the world had changed somewhat at that point with the war on terrorism. I can't remember if it was underway at this point, but it was declared. Let's put it that way. An interesting go at the series. It only lasted for one season, and there were 43 episodes in all, but it was often aired as 2 episodes were shown in the time slot. So it was often, not always, but it was often 2 episodes were shown. I will discussing just the first episode this time. Taking the reign, they had a traditional narrator appearing on screen and talking over, as with Rod Serling, but in this instance, this was done by Forrest Whitaker. Very good actor, very good presence, good choice. However, I think there was a few issues with the look and feel of this series based on what was going on in the zeitgeist. I think that may have been problematic and caused it to be cancelled after one season. I did notice one little aside that made me chuckle, which is they got Mark Snow involved in music composition here. Mark Snow famously from the X-Files, so they were kind of tying into the X-Files thing. Okay, so this particular run consisted of a number of original stories, remakes of the original series, and in fact sequels to episodes in the original series. For example, there's a very famous episode of the Twilight Zone. It's called "It's a Good Life," and I think that one was included in the Twilight Zone the movie as well. That particular story, but the sequel was called "It's Still a Good Life." Interesting. And some of the actors in that one, some of the actors from the original returned to sort of serve in that one. Kind of interesting. And some of the changes are also pretty interesting. Some of the episodes, I will talk about this episode shortly, but I want to talk about some of the other stuff they did. For example, they remade The Monsters Are in Maple Street, a very, very famous, one of the best episodes of the Twilight Zone. They remade it. Well, the original was called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, but this was The Monsters Are on Maple Street, which is an episode about paranoia and things changing on the outside. The original episode was more about they kind of start thinking about there may have been alien sightings or UFOs nearby, and they start speculating aliens have done this to them towards the end. And they also turn on each other like someone's acting different, and they'll become a bit of a mob. It becomes Lord of the Flies. That's kind of an interesting one. Now, the interesting change for me was, in that original one, it was aliens with focus. In the remake, it was terrorists. Now, given 9/11 was the year before, and that was very impactful on the sort of American psyche and indeed the world psyche. So it kind of it's interesting they made that change, and I think perhaps some of the darker elements in this season's one of the reasons it may have failed is because once disaster happens or bad things happen, people kind of want escapism. I believe. And I mean, if you look at the 30s, say, you know, some of the worst depressions ever, some of the greatest sort of escapist musicals were made. So, you know, it's kind of... in fact, the concerns tend to fall out in the mainstream, that they're, you know, the day-to-day concerns, they tend to be reflected in horror. If you want a genre that kind of keeps reflecting what are the real phobic points in a society at that point, horror is quite a good reflection. However, drama and so on tends to, when things are bad, stuff tends to be looking for good. When life is reasonably okay and comfortable, then you get the sort of dark stuff emerging. So I got a feeling the show may have failed because of that. It's interesting they were trying to, I mean, the X-Files was also failing at this time and coming into cancellation. Partly because Duchovny and Anderson were not so much involved, but also partly because I think what really worked in the 90s in terms of not trusting the government may have stopped working properly or being a big thing in people's lives once 9/11 happened. I think 9/11 is a sort of turning point, and this hit just after. So, yeah. As I say, there were 43 episodes, and it ran from September the 18th, 2002 to May the 21st, 2003, for a fairly solid run. There, but it did not get recommissioned. Okay, let's talk about the specific episode. First episode in the run is Evergreen, directed by Ala Croker and written by Jill Blottervogel, and aired on September the 18th, 2002. This was actually produced number 6 in the production line, but they aired it as the first one, and it was the first one shown. There was a second episode aired on the same night. As I say, they often showed these in pairs, and it was called One Night at Mercy. This one sounds more whimsical because it involves Death wanting to take a break from his work, you know. So yeah, that sounds way more whimsical. This first one, Evergreen, is way more serious. Basically, a very annoyed, angry teenage girl who obviously her family doesn't understand and she hates them all. They move to a special gated community, and they're moving because of her. She keeps causing problems, and the family are kind of moving there as a last-ditch attempt. And what we don't understand initially is the nature of this gated community. They are extremely convention-oriented. You know, you basically have to conform. And as the episode, and I won't spoil it too much, I believe this is on YouTube. I could be wrong, but I believe it's on YouTube. As it goes on, it becomes darker and darker. Mind you, if I don't spoil it, I really can't tell you too much about it. Well, basically, the level of conformity you need to adhere to is lethal. Let's put it that way. You don't obey the rules, bad things happen to you. And it kind of ends up in a kind of weird way in that you see her family actually kind of happy about what happened because they belong now in this community. And it's got a very harsh way of dealing with the young who tend to be rebellious, let's face it. That's a kind of a thing. But this one is like the worst kind of approach. Yeah, I can't see this being very, you know, it had no happy feel. No, Twilight Zone is often a series about hope, and this particular episode, it was not about hope. It was about if you don't toe the line, bad things will happen. Interesting one, and I think that may have messed. I haven't looked into how this was perceived in terms of critical reviews, but I feel that in particular probably wouldn't have gone down so well. I don't know. It was reasonably well made. In many respects, it reminds you of the darker anthologies like Black Mirror and things like that. But it was obviously way before Black Mirror. Had quite a significant number of people cast in it. You know, actors who were big deals at the time and well known. The likes of, I don't know, James Remar, Jane Presley. I'm just having a look at the list. Elizabeth Berkley, Shannon Elizabeth. Kind of mid-tier actors, you know. There's no real ones that jump out at me as like, wow, that person was involved. But, you know, the names I know, and definitely biggish names from around the turn of the millennia. So, yes. an interesting show, and I kind of, almost just by watching this first episode, I felt like, oh, I think I know why this failed. Knowing the time. Now, if it had been made 5 years earlier, it would have definitely succeeded, I believe. But I like the concept of doing sequels of previous episodes. That's a great idea. And the remakes I'm okay with. I'm just looking to see if they got the classic, the William Shatner one, if they tried to remake that. Let's have a quick look through this. No, they didn't. So they didn't do the real obvious ones, but they the Monsters That Chew on Maple Street sort of remake of that is kind of interesting. I might go ahead and watch that one. I kind of want to see how they did it. It has to be said, this particular episode was about 20 minutes rather than 25, so it's even shorter than the original Twilight Zone. So, but I guess they were trying to pack 2 in viewing, so fair enough. That might be why they put 2 together. They could sort of stretch it out to an hour. Maybe might be a bit easier. I don't really know. Interesting one, and I do want to kind of wind up these Twilight Zone ones, because there was a full reboot in 2019. I want to talk about that sometime real soon as well. I want to get the variants of the Twilight Zone done and dusted as we're coming near to the end of this season one. I say that, there's probably another 50 or 60 episodes I've got to do to sort of wind up to a point. I think I've covered every anthology that I think I should have covered, apart from ones not been made yet, obviously. Okay, I am going to stop there. It was okay. It's probably more watchable now than it maybe was at the time. I don't know, actually, because we're not quite under the same umbrella. We are on different phobic points affecting our society at the minute, but it's kind of an interesting aside. And 20 minutes, why not, right? If you can get to it. If it is on YouTube, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, I'm going to wind up there. Before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We're not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to